Proportional Response, Book 1, Chapter 12, Part 4, An Elevator with a View. The space elevator car decoupled from the station, and they had a slight feeling of movement before the gravity generators compensated. Hannibal smiled to himself. On a public car, the gravity generators gave you a down. They didn't compensate. His aunt turned to the two bodyguards. "You gentlemen have done a fine job, and I mean that. I have been around bodyguards before, and the two of you made me feel completely safe, while, at the same time, making me nearly forget you were there. Thank you. Now, I would like some time to speak privately with my nephew. I am sure you can agree that we are under no threat here, and you can both retire to one of the bedrooms for a couple of hours." The two men visibly relaxed, somehow. Hannibal would have sworn that both appeared totally relaxed before, but a sort of tense alertness he'd barely noticed went out of them. They turned to each other, nodded, and headed towards one of the rooms. "Thank you so much, you sweet dears." She pointed to the human. "And you, I'd love the chance to talk to you for a while, at some point on this trip down. I haven't met a human before, and would like to get your opinion on some." George bowed his head slightly and spoke in a formal tone. "As you will, ma'am." She waved a hand at him and made a noise. "Oh dearie, it is Eldia, please. You are far too cute to be all formal with me in private. Also, that was a completely personal request that you have every right to refuse, and I promise not to be offended if you do." She winked at him. "Well, not to be offended enough to let anyone know anyway." George cracked a smile, seemingly in spite of himself. "Happy to oblige then, miss. At your convenience." Eldia frowned and drew her eyebrows down. It took Hannibal a moment to figure out why she seemed displeased, but he managed to jump in before she reiterated her request that they drop the formalities. "Thank you, George. I think you will really enjoy the chat. My aunt here is, well, you've known her for more than 5 minutes now." He gave the man a broad smile, which George returned. Then Hannibal turned to his aunt. "George here wasn't holding on to formality, Aunt Eldia. He is from a place the humans call Texas, and that is just how he talks, particularly to women." Both of the women's eyebrows raised, and his aunt gave George an appraising look. "Well, I must say, I think I like it then. Very polite and kind. I may have to visit this Texas of yours sometime. What are you grinning about, George? Did I say something funny?" "Not making fun of you, miss. I promise. It is more of an inside joke. I'll tell you all about it later, after you had a chance to spend some time with our boy here." He then touched his hand to his head in an odd gesture, nodded, looked at the women, said, "Ladies," and made his exit. Hannibal turned to the ladies and found a frown on Vashna's face. He cocked his head in an inquisitive gesture, and she looked at the door, then at him. "I have heard a lot about these humans, and a little about the ones that apparently chose to join the Republic. It seems like they need to be taught protocol, if I may be so bold. Good woman, Eldia and I are mere citizens, but you are a ranking ambassador and voice of the Republic, yet the human directs his exiting courtesies to us and not to you." His aunt frowned at her protégé, but nodded agreement, then turned a questioning eye at him. He smiled in response. "The man is from Texas. I am not sure what that means, but that is what the other humans keep telling me when he acts like that. He is a good man, though, and well worth putting up with the eccentricities." Vashna gave a small smile, a nod that he had no idea how to read while his aunt chuckled. She spoke in wry tones. "I am even more intrigued. The women from this Texas must be either the most cowed, most pampered, or most brutal women in all of sapient space. I look forward to the chance to discuss the matter with George." Hannibal laughed. "After you do, please fill me in on what you find out. You have a way of getting information out of people that I have always sought to emulate." Eldia dismissed matter with a flip of her hand. "Oh, I'd say you've done a fine job of learning that skill. Otherwise, how could you have managed in this posting, especially with the way things have been heating up? Speaking of things heating up, shall we get down to business? I do want to get caught up with you, but I've heard a quaint saying from the humans, business before pleasure, and my contacts have been blowing up my inbox and even my comms ever since the word got out that I'd accepted a posting here. But this is your embassy and your show. So, did you have someone in mind that you wanted me to start brokering deals with?" Hannibal felt his hands blush again, and blinked rapidly at the unexpected turn. His aunt dropped her hands into her lap.
You didn't ask me here for my contacts and brokering skills.
He shook his head a little sheepishly. He'd never heard about her brokering deals. She cocked her head a little to one side and gave him a lopsided smile.
Okay, what were you planning on having me do?
Inibal raised a hand, pulled out a privacy device, set it on the table, and turned it on. His aunt looked at it with raised eyebrow as her manner shifted slightly.
Is there some sort of specific trouble going on so severe that you need that? Not in particular, but caution is important these days. I'd gotten the sense you didn't want to discuss anything sensitive out in public, but I had no idea that things were so bad.
He nodded.
It is worse, Aunt Eldia. It really is. I wish I could tell you all of it. Oh, but you can, dear. Vashna and I both have to the diadem clearance. So, if you feel there is reason for us to know, you can tell us.
He felt a wave of gratitude when she handed him a pad, proving her credentials, which spared him from having to ask.
Okay, well that increases the number of things I have to tell you. Wait, how did you end up with that kind of clearance? I have worked some deals between some of our arms manufacturers and electronics dealers, and a few other things that required clearance.
She dismissed the matter with a wave of her hand.
I'll tell you all about it later. So, what is it you wanted me to do?
He gave her his best disarming smile.
I want you to keep writing the same articles you have always written about your adventures, but write them about this place and the people you meet, particularly the humans. Big changes are coming, Aunt Eldia. Events are going to push the Empire, and our people, to the forefront of the galactic stage in ways we have never been. The average citizen of the Empire is aware of alien races in only the most academic sense. Most have never even seen one in a video, much less in person. You have a way with your articles of making people who read them, or watch your feeds, feel like they have actually been to the places you describe and have met the people you write about. You know you have received diadem attention from your articles, right? I have it on good authority that she reads them on a regular basis.
She gave a small smile, but her chin turned down a little and her hands blushed. She knows, but isn't entirely comfortable with the fact. Maybe she hasn't known for long.
Also, Intel has a copy of every article you've produced on file, and all of them have heavy annotations. Don't look at me like that. In this case, it is a good thing. The annotations are mostly for future PR drives to capitalize on the swell of tourism and interest in places and people you highlight. You've done a lot for the Empire. You have made people in every corner of our Empire feel more connected to places farthest away from them, and so helps the cohesion of the Empire as a whole.
Her hands blushed bright, and she and Vashna shared a look that he had no idea how to read. She laughed and tried to wave his comments off.
Oh, I haven't done all of that, my dear nephew. I like to think that maybe I've helped a few people's lives seem a little less isolated, but I can hardly be credited for saving the cohesion of the Empire.
He gave her a wry smile.
True, you can't. But you are hardly the only one writing articles of that kind, and at least 2 of the magazines that you write in are semi-covertly subsidized by the diadem for the reasons I just outlined. The thing is, we need Imperial citizens to start thinking more and more about people and places outside the Empire, and feel connected that way to the League as a whole. The diadem has PR campaigns and education initiatives to that end, but there is also an open mandate to contribute to the effort. When I found that out, I thought of you.
Keep a straight face, Annabelle. You tell small lies all the time as an ambassador. You know how to do this. She doesn't need to know the first reason you thought to bring her here. She gave him a knowing smile and exchanged another of those looks with her assistant.
Well, when you put it that way, it makes my silly little travel articles seem so much more important. Of course, to do what you want, I will need to meet and mingle with a lot of aliens, which will mean making a lot of contacts. The thing about me writing my articles, though, is that it will take me very little time. So, how about this? I will do what you ask, and even take on some extra writing to help with these initiatives you speak of. At the same time, I would like to put together a deal or two for some of my contacts with Alien Corporation. I promise I will have at least a 3-month lead on articles within a month, but I also expect that I will have at least 1 major deal ready for review by the end of the month as well, and at least 2 more getting started. So, I propose that I work with your staff in both capacities.
Vashna spoke up, surprising him slightly.
If I may, Ambassador? Thank you. Your aunt's proposal is wise. I prepared a report for you based on the discussions we've had since she got your letter.
She handed him a data pad. He took it and began to examine it as she spoke.
These are the first few things we wish to look into. I will help her get all this done, and I promise to make sure she has time for writing everything you need. Really, if I may be so bold, I think you are very much onto something with having her embedded here and writing her articles.
He took another long look at her. She spoke with an authority that did not seem to fit her age. Then he looked at the report she'd handed him and had to admit she had skills beyond what he'd have expected as well. His eyebrows went up at a few of the proposals. Some of these could really strengthen the Empire, and others would create a lot of goodwill with various aliens. Wait, how many of these? At least half of these proposals involve the humans. He had to suppress a chuckle. This will make my other intentions a little easier. She'll have to work with Henry a lot. He put the pad down and turned a big smile on both of them.
I am so glad I asked you here. I think it is going to turn out better than I thought. For you, for me, and for the Empire. Maybe even for the troubles to come.
Both women nodded and beamed at him as they realized he'd accepted their proposal. Then his aunt got very serious.
What do you mean about the troubles to come?
He took a deep breath, let it out, stood and walked to the window.
War is coming. No, don't start. It is inevitable. We have at least a year, in the worst case, but not more than 5 years, before the Zoltans and the humans go to war in earnest. There have already been some incidents, mostly by proxy from the Zoltans. Henry, the human ambassador, and I worked hard to try to avoid it, but it is too late now. Not that there was ever much chance of avoiding it anyway.
She settled back into the pose she used to use when something troubled him, and he needed no other prompting. He talked for hours and told her everything, from the shocking things he learned when he became ambassador to his last discussions with Henry. After listening, she went to the window and stared out of it for a while. When she turned back, she looked oddly happy.
I am so glad you called me here, nephew. This is going to be interesting to say the least, and I can't wait to meet some of these people. I have some ideas for articles to write, of course. My first few will be about the embassy and the League complex, but my first personality piece will be the Duke. In truth, I've wanted to meet him for a long time anyway. After that, I will write about this intriguing human you keep mentioning.
She sat down and gave him a look that seemed almost hungry.
When do I get to meet him?
He smiled at her.
You remember those fighter practices I talked about? There is one in 2 days. Oh, good. Do you think someone can get me some armor made in that time?
He laughed.
You are as irrepressible as ever. No, but they have some you can borrow.
They laughed and transitioned to other subjects. The rest of the trip down was relaxed, and they spent most of it getting caught up on personal matters, though his aunt did make good on her promise to talk to George. Enable noticed Vashna staring at him a few times. Sometimes she seemed to be simply very interested in what he had to say. Others he felt almost like a lab specimen being studied. He decided that any woman dynamic enough to be taken on by his aunt was likely to have some quirks, and put the matter out of his mind so he could concentrate on enjoying a few hours with family and away from his responsibilities.